Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of week again. Everybody's favorite segment, the MLB Power Rankings here on YouTube, guys. Last week's video was just absolutely crazy. I really thank you, all the new subscribers. We got over 50 and we got really close. We're less than 100 away now from our next giveaway. So once we hit 1,700 subs, I am going to be giving away a hat. So last week's video put us really close. We could get there in the next week or two. So if you are new, make sure you're subscribed, smash that like button, get this video out to more people. The discussion last week was really interesting. We saw a lot of Houston Astros fans popping in there, and this week we might see some different fans because there is a little bit of a shakeup, especially in this middling row. We have a new team in the bottom row as well. So let's just jump right into it at number 30, sticking around. I think we all know they're going to stay here the whole rest of the season and pretty much cemented that, in my opinion, by losing to the White Sox this weekend. They also lost to Houston earlier in the week. I think they're up to 21 wins after picking up a win today, so maybe they're going to have a chance to not be the worst team in the MLB. It started off really bad. They're starting to win games at least every week now. But still a lot of things to go wrong. I think the one thing helping Colorado is the fact that they do play in Colorado. Next up, that team we were just talking about, number 29. The White Sox went for the sweep today, and they had a lead in today's game and almost were able to sweep. So I do think there is a little bit of a difference. Colorado definitely solid in that bottom row. However, the White Sox, when we're looking at teams above 500, their record is just absolutely awful. They went 0-3 against the Dodgers to start the week. It's another team that's just a long ways away in this bottom row. Next up, they cleaned house today. Manager and general manager both fired after today's game being swept by Boston. They did start the week off. They beat Detroit in a series, and that was pretty good. And it was a split doubleheader earlier in the week, making up a game. So overall, coming into the series, I think things were going all right. But if we look back a couple of weeks, Washington had a terrible losing streak going as well. So I think the things are just compounding. All these young guys, they need a new voice here. And the sweep against Boston just did not go in their favor. Number 27, this is the strangest team. They started the week going 3-0 against St. Louis. Not only did they sweep that series, they did not give up a single run against the Cardinals. And then they go and they play Seattle and they go 0-3 and they don't score a single run against Seattle, losing the last two games 1-0. Pittsburgh's offense just has not been there this year. The pitching on there hasn't been good. It's been enough to be a playoff caliber team if they could just get some run support. We see it again. Paul Skeens going today. He's going to get the L, losing 1-0, just not getting any run support. His ERA is around 2. Best in the majors, right? And he's just not getting any wins. I think he only has 2 wins on the year. Paul Skeens and co at number 27. Number 26. Do put the Athletics. I think that's the same spot as they were last year. I forgot to mention off at the top of the video, and it's kind of going to be said here because normally we do this video right before the Sunday nighter, and for some reason, I guess it must be because it's the July 4th long weekend. Congratulations, happy celebration to all you guys out there. But for whatever reason, there's 3 late games today, and they're even later than normal. Athletics being one of them against the Giants. That's kind of what reminded me to do it just now. So 1-1 against the Giants so far. 2-1 against Tampa, so could be a winning week if they pull off a big win again tonight against the Giants. So Athletics kind of seem to be, in my opinion, there's a little bit of a line here. Starting to look at teams that working their way out of this bottom row. Bottom row is not where you want to be. You want to be working your way up. For these teams, they're trying to get out. These teams, I think, are pretty much cemented there. Number 25, welcome to the bottom row. I think it's 9 losses in a row, might be 8, somewhere in that department. But this week they did go 0-6 against the Cubs and then against their division rival, the Detroit Tigers, over the weekend. Just has been a disaster for Cleveland. They had a pretty good April, and since then it's been a little teetering and it's just like falling off a cliff. Wasn't sure about putting them in the bottom row, and then I just had to do it because number 24 just seemed a little bit too strong as of late. So just the last thing about Cleveland, it seems like it's not going to be going back in their favor. The rest of the division's just a little bit ahead of them. They're better than the White Sox. Cleveland just not sorting it out. Miami. We talked about them last week. They even got the chance to wear the hat. They continued, followed it up with a 500 week, 2-1 against Minnesota. So they did win a series early in the week, following this weekend over Milwaukee. had a chance to win that series. It was a close game today as well. So Miami, in my opinion, seems to be that team that is growing. They're kind of on their way out of this bottom row. We've seen them flirt in this area a couple times this year. The winning streak, as well as just the pitching that we've seen as of late, and some clutch hitting as well, getting it done. So Miami working their way out of the bottom row. Can they move up a little bit? It's possible. Number 23, funny enough, sticking in their division. Miami, I don't think, has been this close to going to third in their division what feels like forever, because Atlanta, Philly, and the Braves just have been so much ahead of them. I meant the Mets as well. Just been so much ahead of them. But the Braves have just not figured out. We thought when the injuries started to get solved that they'd start to find a win, but this week was not good. Getting swept this weekend by the Baltimore Orioles, a team that has been notorious this season for struggling. 1-2 against the Angels earlier in the week, so 1-5 week, and a chance where they were starting to make some progress, possibly in the division race. But right now, it's just not looking good for Atlanta. They need to find a win streak if they're going to start working their way up to where the playoff contenders start to be. Number 22, just spoke with them. They have top 5 AL record in the past month and a half. So we got to have a little bit of credit there. They have battled their way out of where they were in the bottom row, but at the same time, they have a long way to go. They really dug themselves a hole with the bad May that they did have. 3-0 against Atlanta. They did lose the series earlier against Texas 1-2. Texas was a team that just had slightly ahead of them. They did lose now back-to-back series against Texas. So just not finding that kind of win, finding the momentum streaks going, holding them back. Number 21. Another one of those games that has that late Sunday night game. 1-1 so far against the Padres. They're playing their rubber match tonight. And they win the series earlier against Baltimore. I did feel like a little bit that Texas is turning the corner. A big solid win yesterday against Padres to really maybe get something going. The one thing hurting them is that Houston has just been extra hot as well. So it's kind of a lot of teams to hop. That's the problem with having such a weak early start to the season. Number 20. Diamondbacks. They're kind of been going a little bit up and down, losing the series this weekend to the Kansas City Royals. This one where they're both in the second bottom row and both teams are trying to salvage their season a little bit, and Diamondbacks have a home field advantage and they fall short in this series. Really hurts them. In my opinion, they're going to be pretty much cemented in this row, it feels like. Sure, they seem pretty strong against some of these weaker teams, but when they start getting into the games that matter, they've been one of the most inconsistent, most wild, entertaining teams to watch this season. But that number 20 kind of feels like where they're going to end up when all is said and done. Number 19. We have the Kansas City Royals. I think they're pretty excited with how the road trip has gone. They went out to Seattle during the week, split that series 2-2. And it was a pretty back and forth series, really close. Two teams that would match up pretty well coming into the season. Both teams being that playoff contender. Kansas City has not been living up to the hype, but to come in on that road trip and go 2-2, pretty happy there. And then to win the series against Arizona, they have started to work their way back up. Part of that is Cleveland falling down the board a little bit and can open the door for Kansas City to be a little bit more of a contender in the wild card race as they chip away their way back up. Number 18, right in their sights of the Royals. Minnesota Twins just slightly ahead of them on this board, and in a 500 week for them, 1-2 against Miami, 2-1 this weekend against the Rays. So a series win against the Rays, pretty solid. They lose the game today, went to extras. I think the Friday game also went to extras. Overall, the series was super close. These teams matched up very well. Minnesota coming out with this big series win. And a team that they're going to be chasing if they're going to get into that wild card hunt. So right there, in the thick of it, about in the middle of the board, this is where we're starting to look at teams that are right there in the wild card hunt. We got to remember, when we start even looking at the Orioles to like 10th, there's only like 5 games that would separate these teams in a wild card race. So we got to keep that in mind. It's very tight. There's some teams that can be mixed around. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Number 17. They were making a case, move up the board even more, and then they fall into a tough series this weekend against the Blue Jays where they got swept. They lost every game by 1 run, Friday and Saturday. Go to extras. Today's game, 3-2 loss. So, overall, the Angels played very well, just fell up a little bit short. Won the series earlier against Atlanta. Overall, they're fighting for 500 coming into this season. That is not where I expected them to be. I did not expect them to be here. I kind of thought they'd be in the bottom row, but the pitching has been there for them. The offense has had its moments, and they have some of the young guys, some of the guys they've been hoping to take steps forward, doing that for this team. So with Mike Trout maybe getting healthy and sitting in that DH spot, Will he be able to make the impact for a team to make a push in a wild card spot? Right now, the Angels are a competitive team, so they're right there in the thick. Number 16. Not really moving as of late. They've kind of been in this area for a little while now. 1-2 against Philly, 1-1 against Texas, rubber match tonight. Falling short, just always seem to be falling short. And yesterday was a prime example when they're playing Texas. There was a couple of times where they had bases loaded, Bogarts was up, and just not being able to deliver situations where they would come from behind and win. Feels like the Padres, when they fall behind in a lot of spots right now, the offense hasn't been there. Pitching has kept them in games at times, and yesterday it just felt like a prime example of what the Padres season is like been going. Just falling short when it matters, people not being clutch and delivering, and that's kind of resulted them into a middle of the pack in the MLB. The April start got them really started well. Standings wise, they're in the wild card slot, but if they keep playing it the way I'm seeing them play, they're gonna fall short. Number 15. At one point, I felt like I was moving them up, and then I took a deeper look at how their week went. It just was not a good week for the Reds. 1-2 against Boston over the week, and then 1-2 against Philly. So 2-4 week. Just seems like whenever Cincinnati gets any momentum going, it falls. I always seem to be talking about them not winning their division, and that was not the case this week. They were playing both American League and outside their division in the NL East and falling short and just not being able to get those win streaks together, I think, is going to start to catch up to these Reds team. However, I do still put them light years ahead of, not light years, but like ahead of the teams, of course, that are below them on the board. So the Reds are in the thick of the race. But they got to find something. If they're going to get in this top 12, they got to find something, because right now it feels like this is the peak situation based on how we've been seeing them play. Definitely got the wrong team here. I almost put number 1 up next. Number 14, Cardinals. 1-1 so far this week. They're another team that is playing the rubber match tonight. One of 3 games. Just weird night for that. But the Cardinals started the week off 0-3 against Pittsburgh and just not scoring runs. So it seems like maybe they're coming back down to earth. It was a really highlighted season for the Cardinals. But if they can salvage the week with a win against the Cubs, they're right back at where they were, basically a 12th spot. 12th spot last week, dropped a couple of spots, losing to Pittsburgh there. Finding a little bit of inconsistencies, and it just feels like some of these other teams have been a little bit stronger. Number 13, Boston. Just every time I feel like Boston is down and out for the season, they put on a week like this week, and the offense is just explosive. 3-0 against Washington, 2-1 against Cincinnati. Really blew up against Washington. We also saw them when they played the Jays. Their offense was quite there. It's the pitching that had issues. Buehler had a pretty good outing this week, and they do have some guys that, like, at the top of their rotation that are solid and going to win them in college games. So I expect Boston can kind of continue to go here. Everyone focused on the Devers trade, them giving up, but maybe it's what they needed to get this momentum going. But the one struggle they do got is this American League East is a powerhouse right now with a lot of these teams playing very well. But 13, they're right on the outside looking at number 12, moving up a couple spots back from last week. Had dropped them significantly. They salvaged it a bit this week, 1-1 against Athletics, rubber match tonight. But San Francisco goes 2-2 against Arizona. So 3-3 week. It's kind of like they're battling through some demons right now. I think they're going to come out the other side, and the pitching is too good to really hold them down. 500 weeks, I think, are going to be more consistent than what we had seen the past 2 weeks. So I think that number 12 is pretty good. Number 11, we got the Tampa Bay Rays dropping a few spots. I think they're starting to be a little more realistic with how they've been playing lately, and the pitching hasn't exactly been holding them in games, giving up more runs than we're used to seeing from them. 1-2 against Minnesota this weekend. 1-2 against the Athletics earlier in the week. So losing week against 2 teams that were in the pretty low parts of this board, and when they were right there in the thick of being pretty much 1 game out of being a division leader. They're now 3 games back with a whole new division leader. We'll get to them in a second. But Rays, right there in the thick. Playoff spot, definitely there. But they got to find it, because they're one of the teams that if they kind of have the kind of week we just saw a couple of weeks in a row, we're going to see them right falling back down to where I really expected them to be. Number 10, one of the biggest fallers of the week. Losing their division this week. Just been some pretty bad record baseball for them over the past 2-3 weeks. I think the big drop, more or less, is because maybe they should have dropped a couple spots each week. but I've been kind of holding them, waiting for something to happen. I'm kind of waiting for the series this week. They go 0-4 against the Blue Jays with both Rodon and Fried losing, which is interesting. And then they do manage to avoid the week sweep, so they do pick up a win today, but go 1-2 against the New York Mets. Just not finding it in them right now. There's a lot of struggles going on with this New York team. Judge, sure, he's crushing home runs and he's getting on base and he's MVP caliber right now, but right now the rest of the team needs to find something going because they are not winning. Sure, maybe it's just a little bit of a midsummer struggle, but we'll see how that turns out for them. Number 9, got the Seattle Mariners sweeping Pittsburgh this week, 2-2 against the Royals for a nice, 5-2 homestand this week. Pretty good for Seattle. Seattle's going to be pretty excited with that. I think the most exciting things we saw was that their pitching was pretty good in the Royal Series as well, shutting Pittsburgh down, giving up 0 runs this weekend. It's kind of Seattle team that we expected. I do not really see Seattle falling below 10th on this board. If anything, I think the floor is here and the sky is the limit. The Seattle team is definitely capable of being in the top tier of the American League. Number 8. Moving up a couple of spots and on an 8-game winning streak, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, and I can't hold them down as much as I always curse myself when I move them up the board and then they just start to lose. That feels like this team is just on a different kind of level than we're used to seeing, at least as Blue Jays fans, the past few years. We've seen some records this week. The 4-0 sweep against the Yankees. This is the first time they swept the Yankees in a 4-game set at home ever. They have some records as well going in terms of 50 wins, in terms of their home record at this point in the season. A lot of things going well for this Blue Jays team in the franchise department. I'm not sure. It looks good right now, but there's a lot of things that seem a little inconsistent at times. So I'm going to put them at number 8 for now, and that they have a pretty easy schedule going into the All-Star break, so they can only build on this division lead, which is now up to 3 games. Number 7. The Brewers moving up a couple of spots, maybe one actually, and it's probably pretty much on the back of Tampa Bay falling down the board. 1-2 against the Mets, 2-1 against Miami. Overall 500 week. The Mets series, they had a doubleheader, and that's one of the losses. So, and the win. So I wasn't too much into that series as much as they are going to play each other more down the stretch, right? But Milwaukee kind of being consistent as of late, so they've kind of earned that spot at number 6. I think they were here last week as well. 2-1 against Milwaukee. Like I just said, 2-1 against the Yankees. Overall winning week, 4-2. Problem is, teams above them just continue to win as well, with one exception, but we'll talk about them in a second. Number 4. Arguably could number 5. Arguably could maybe make a little bit of changes in these next 3 spots. I kind of went with this. 3-0 against Cleveland, 1-1 against St. Louis. For me, I wanted to really see them dominate the series against St. Louis. I want to see them be able to be consistent in their division. We haven't quite seen it from the Cubs right now, and division is closer than I think the Cubs would have liked, and what they've been showing it probably should be. So that's kind of what I have holding them back. Number 4. Another good week for them, 2-1 against the Padres, 2-1 against Cincinnati. 2 teams that are going to be in that wild card race. We're in the slots here and there and everywhere, but the pitching delivering for Philly in a couple of the wins this week. And Philly is pretty much kind of starting to look like they are going to be the big favorites in this division. Mets right on their tail as well. But right now they could be making a case that these, like I said, any of these 3 teams could be the powerhouse in the National League. So the Dodgers do drop a couple of spots. They had been at number 1 for a couple of weeks. I've been told maybe they shouldn't. I was on the fence. I've had times where I've dropped them and I'm like, the pitching just isn't there. It doesn't seem to be there. But then they come back and just offensively dominate. But I think watching them play Houston this weekend really demonstrated to me that the things and the worries I had with the Dodgers being able to play the consistent teams that are solid was their 18-1 loss on Friday really kind of exposed the Dodgers to me. Pitching and the depth of their pitching is starting to catch up with them, especially in that situation, right, with Caspias leading that game off. They end up getting swept by Houston this weekend too, but they did start the week 3-0 against the White Sox. So at one end of the spectrum, they always seem to dominate the bottom row teams, and the offense is always able to take advantage of those weak pitching. But now we're starting to see when they play the tougher teams, and there are other moments where their pitching is just really holding them back. And we saw it this weekend. as well as some of the guys like Mookie Betts just not having the season of their life. So starting to add up to the Dodgers, but right now I am holding them still as the favorite in the National League. At number 2, moving up one spot from last week, a large part of that being on the back of that sweep against the Dodgers that we just talked about. Houston also seems to have the best record since middle of May across the entire MLB. They are the hottest team in the American League by far. But they fell a little bit behind. They don't quite have the lead in the division that you would want a team to have at the number 1 spot, because the number 1 spot right now, they just have been probably the most consistent team in the MLB all season long, and followed it up with 3-0 against Cleveland this weekend, just extending their division lead to double digits. It's just one of those teams that they're on their way, and they're going to get the first round bye, and they're really setting up with Skubal as the anchor of this rotation to really have a meaningful playoff run. On top of that, 1-2 against Washington, we're not going to hold too much against it because every team's going to have series where they lose. Detroit, at times, I wasn't sure that they were quite there at the number 1 spot. But as other teams falter along the way, they're like the only team that hasn't seemed to have that 15-game stretch where it's just like, a little iffy. Detroit has been consistent all season long up to now. There you guys have it. 1 through 30 in the MLB. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if I'm just completely out to lunch on one of these things. And of course, keep the discussion going in the comments. I look forward to those. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, etc., etc. And we'll see you for that next video.